Welcome to Podula Rasa. I'm David Blank.
And I'm Jim Esch.
This is a podcast about finding something in nothing.
Welcome to Podula Rasa. I'm Jim, and I'm here with Dave Blank. Dave's in a new location now, Buffalo, New York.
That's right.
Which is known as the city of no illusions. I understand.
I hadn't heard that one. I've heard Nickel City. But
Dave, I wanted to hand it off to you to kick off our new season 3 of Podula Rasa. We've been off for a while, and what do you have queued up for this episode?
Great. Well, we had talked about discussing the concept of moving and the idea of lessons learned during that process, and that seemed like a great topic for me because I've had quite a journey over the last couple of months. The brief version of my story is that we decided to move to Buffalo for my wife's job, and we decided to sell our house, which we were able to do before we even put it on the market, and for a variety of reasons decided to leave the closing until August. Well, in the period of time before that, we had a flood in our finished basement, and the closing's not going to happen in August. This has kicked off kind of a whole, almost like a mindfulness exercise for me, although I didn't realize I was on that path until fairly recently. Just making a move from an area where I had lived for 28 years, and then having this on top of it has made me incredibly present in the moment, almost to the point where I can't be not present. I can't fade out like I would normally do in a different some situation. So that's been sort of a nice benefit to a rather tumultuous experience.
Can you kind of like dig into that living in the moment aspect? Like what does that look like in terms of what you've been going through with your sort of day-to-day travails of moving and being sort of between these two places as you go from one to the next? Not to mention all the problems with the basement and everything, but just
right.
What is that live? What do you mean by living in the moment that way?
Being present, being really, really present. I think there's a for a year ago, for example, if you had asked me what I was doing with my life or where I was going to be going, I might not be sure, even though I have a career path and things are pretty well set. But I would kind of be thinking about my place in the universe and how I've been in a house for 14 years and I could probably end up dying in that house, because nothing had changed. And then in very short order, everything changed. And so where I might have been more likely to be somewhat nebulous in my thinking about a variety of things, everything has come into sharp focus.
Like you have to do this particular thing at this particular day and at this particular moment, like try to get, is it partly that, like sort of like being, I think, like, it's because super focused?
Yes, it's because of that. In the past, it was just me getting my work done, me meeting with you to do a podcast, me taking my daughter to karate, that kind of thing. Now I have all these other things that I have to think about: rebuilding a basement, dealing with an insurance company, trying to keep our buyers happy so that they still want to buy, that kind of thing. And in addition to the feeling of being present, it also has completely disrupted my sleep schedule to the point where over the last week, for example, I don't think I slept much at all. I'd be up like every hour because my mind was just constantly going. So I think those things are connected. But the result is that I don't zone out at all. I'm constantly doing something. I'm always in that moment thinking, what am I going to do right now? Like, for example, when we finish this podcast, I'm taking my daughter shopping at a bookstore locally. And, I'm kind of almost looking forward to doing this and then shutting off my computer, shutting off my work and going and doing that. And that's where I will be for the next, couple hours. And in the past, I'd leave and I'd be thinking about the work I had to do when I came back, and those things. I'm just able to close that off until it's time to reopen it, if that makes sense.
Right now you're present in the moment of podcasting, but
Correct.
shortly you'll be present in the moment of bookstoring. Like
Correct.
you'll be like, let me experience this space and
Yes.
look at these books and be with my daughter and really like enjoy that
Right.
time and in a sense make the most of it, but just be aware of it, like being present in that space at that moment of time.
Yes. Exactly. Exactly.
So as stressful as this move has been, it sounds like in a way it's taught you some positive lessons about like how to exist from moment to moment.
It feels like that. It's one of those lemonade from lemons moments.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You said you had been in that house or in New Hampshire for 28 years, was it?
The house for 15 and in the New Hampshire area for 28.
Was that the longest time you'd ever been in one
Anywhere.
house,
In any one location. Yeah.
in any one location? So you grow attached to a space like that, and it's got to be like super hard to move to
Oh, it was
tear
easy.
up everything. Oh, it was easy.
Yeah, it felt really, I couldn't wait.
How so? Like,
Well, I mean, I know it's like I never look back. My wife and I have been making our lives there for 19 years. And because of our particular circumstance, when she started applying, I just said, hey, listen, you've been here for me for this period of time, and wherever you want to go, you want to go to Australia, I don't care, wherever you pick, we'll go. As long as it's good for our daughter, I don't matter, because I can do whatever I need to do where I am. And so when she landed this job, and it was such the right job for her, based, on the person I know, I switched immediately. I had absolutely no feelings of attachment to this place where I'd lived for 28 years, where I was essentially local. I mean, here's how local I was. When the movers came on Monday and they were loading up our stuff, the guy pointed out that somebody had dinged the truck going under a low bridge, and he hadn't lowered enough, or it just didn't make it. And so I said, "Oh, was he trying to go under the Glen Road overpass or rail pass?" And he looked at me and he goes, "That's exactly where he was." And there's other areas where it could have been, but I know the area so well that I knew that that's probably where he tried to go through and damage the truck. But yet, even though being that local, I couldn't wait to move on. And I'm still, I don't feel any sense of attachment to that area where I buried people, I buried animals who lived with us. I just left. It's like I couldn't wait to just make that break and go.
it's really interesting. So you didn't have the kind of attachment, but do you think that's like an offshoot of your meditation practice where you've like kind of
Mm,
in like we talk a lot about letting go and detachment and
right.
things like that with meditation.
Well, I think it had to do something with that, but also having to do with the sense of loss that I experienced when we were packing to leave, and I was culling out my stuff, and we threw away a lot, and then piled everything up in this staging area in the basement, which flooded, and we lost more. So it was like these two successive periods of loss, one which was intentional and one which was absolutely not intentional. I mean, I think I told you I lost like 10 years worth of poetry that I had written, that, a lot of it on March 30th. It was so wet and so moldy that I couldn't salvage any of it. And
Mm.
this has zero value. So hopefully people from State Farm aren't listening. But like when it got thrown away, and that was it. It was just gone. And it was this stuff that I was going to go through someday. And then all of a sudden, like a friend you haven't called, and then you find out that they're gone. That's it. The door's closed and it's over. And so, but I didn't grieve that. Like it wasn't upsetting to me. Even leaving the house, the place where my daughter lived her whole life, where she was born. Like I walked into her room for the last time, and I imagined her in her crib, like, like looking over this one time that, it's like 14 years ago now. And I had that memory, and I kind of tear up thinking about it.
Yeah.
But in that moment, it was just like, okay, so that memory still exists in me. I don't need to be in the house for that. So there's no, I wouldn't go back.
It makes me think of a couple moves I've gone through. So I had a very stable childhood. Like we moved from Western Pennsylvania to Broomall in Southeast Pennsylvania when I was like about 3 weeks old. So I grew up in Broomall and didn't move until my senior year of college, when right after I graduated, my parents sold the house and moved back to Western PA. But I'd have this distinct memory of almost saying goodbye to my bedroom. Like once it was all cleared out, and I just kind of did a mental, like a visual scan, and just tried to like, it was sort of easy. It wasn't like super emotional. I think it maybe had something to do with the age I was at, because I was like anticipating moving to Texas for grad school, and I had a lot to look forward to. So I was ready to leave all that behind me. And, Broomall was a little bit of like a boring place to grow up in the suburbs, I think I'm more fond of it now than I was back then.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
But I do have a distinct memory of like sort of saying goodbye to that space. And like, I have one photograph of my bedroom that's been saved. I wish I had taken more photographs so I could see the rest of the room, because I've had to mentally reconstruct it. But that was a big move for us, but for me it was relatively easy. But I've had harder moves.
Things they never work out the way we plan. The body is unwilling, the heart makes it stand. Don't know where I'm going or where you'll be. We have to go our separate ways, and that don't make me happy. My family had to move away, couldn't pay the bills. I had to move ahead out to the hills. You could not stand it, had to leave that phony place. I'll never say I blame you for needing your own space. Hoped if you didn't follow me, I'd follow you. But situations turned on us, there was nothing I could do. This country's just too big for us, we may never meet again. You tell me that you'll learn to write, I'll have to learn to miss a friend. things they never work out the way you plan. You get a taste of something nice and it's gone again. Life can be so beautiful and it turns on you so cruel. Guess I'll have to toughen it up, but you know I'll always miss you.
So when Stacy and I, like our first apartment was in Media, Pennsylvania, and we lived there for about 5 years. And then Stacy got a job in St. Louis, not unlike your wife getting a job in Buffalo. And we were due for a move. We were ready, like we were sort of struggling economically and everything. But like we didn't know anybody in St. Louis at all. So it was really very much a move into the unknown. And by that point, after 5 years being in your 20s, like we had accumulated a fair amount of stuff like books and records and things. So we rented the truck and we spent like all day packing that truck. We got some friends to help us, and it took to clean the apartment. It took all day. We were not done until like relatively late at night. I think it was 8 or 9 o'clock at night. It was dark out when we finally pulled away. And it was in a way heartbreaking, like, because that was kind of like our first place together. We really liked Media, and I still like Media, and we were leaving everybody behind. All our friends, my family was still in Pennsylvania, so it was like exciting to be kind of going off on this adventure, but it was like I felt very attached to that space, and I broke down.
Have you gone back to both places, to your family home and that place, and did it feel any different?
Oh yeah, frequently. Like I not long ago drove past a house in Broomall, and it looks like it's in great shape, and the little pine tree that was off to the side of the yard is now a big pine tree, and like other trees that used to be there are no longer there, but it looks very familiar, and it's nice to see that it's being well cared for. I have a very positive feeling about it. And the apartment in Media, like we have a very strange feeling when we go back to Media. We might go to a restaurant or something and walk around the old neighborhood, and it all comes back. It all comes back. It's like, but you feel there's this weird sort of time warp effect where like you're older, but you're walking amidst the place that your younger self used to live. And it's almost like that ghost is still there, the ghost of the younger self. So it's kind of haunting. Yeah, absolutely. We've never been back to St. Louis though. So when we moved from St. Louis, like it was a very different feeling. I did sort of say goodbye to that one. Well, we moved from an apartment to a house, and we rented the house for like about 6 months. And then I got a job and we moved back to PA. So the apartment we loved, it was in this like beautiful Art Deco apartment building in a very nice neighborhood in St. Louis. And that was a little hard to leave that space because that's where Devin was born. And she was about a year old by the point that we moved. I remember doing that similar kind of scan of the space, kind of like, I want to remember these windows, these views. We were on the 6th floor corner apartment and had great views. And but we haven't been back to St. Louis at all. So I don't know what that's going to feel like if I ever get back there.
Yeah. How long ago was that?
Well, we moved in, I guess it was 98.
Okay.
We moved
a while.
Or 97 maybe.
Yeah.
So we were in St. Louis from 93 to 97. Sometimes some of my moves, I wish I had been more detached, where I just like, nobody wants to lose all their stuff in a basement flood. That's true.
No, they don't.
But it sort of takes care of a lot for you. It's like, well, okay, we can't move this now. It just goes into the dumpster or the bonfire or wherever. And I have hauled a lot of stuff from like house to house over the years. And I think if I ever move out of this house, I will take a lot less with me.
Yeah.
let a lot more go.
Speaking of letting go, I had another experience, which you just reminded me about. Before we officially actually left the house, we had one last bonfire in this fire pit that I had dug about 10 years ago. And the last thing that I burned was a big box full of divorce papers from when I got divorced. I don't know why I was saving it. I had everything. I had all the interrogatories. I had every bill. I think at some point I was thinking that it would be a good idea to go through and add up the bills, because I had never done that. And I was curious to know just how much it was. And, because in part back then, I think I made maybe, if I on a good month, maybe about $1,500 take home. And I had some bills that were like $4,000 or $5,000 a month from this experience. And this went on for 3 years. And I somehow I made it through. I cashed investments, or I borrowed money from my parents or whatever, but I got through it. And then I kind of wondered, like, how much did I spend, but in that moment, I burned it. I felt absolutely nothing. And then it was done. There was just this big pile of ashes, which is still in that fire pit, unless the people who are moving in made a fire last night, which maybe they did. But it took a long time to burn all that paper, because it was a lot, like it was copy paper, which doesn't burn particularly well.
Oh, yeah.
But I poked at that thing until it was done.
I bet it felt good.
No, I didn't feel anything. I thought I would, but I don't know.
This reminds me of a conversation we had on a very early podcast where we talked about bonfires, and I told a story about how I burned all my grad school applications in my failed attempt to go back to grad school and get into PhD programs, which really was a bad idea. But I just took all that stuff to Ridley Creek Park and burned it in one of the
I remember that
charcoal things. And I didn't have, it's interesting that you said that, because I didn't have a feeling either. I just sort of watched it burn and let it go. And like in retrospect, that was a good feeling, but it was just more like, it was, I guess, a moment of detachment. It's like, as you see it go up in flames, you are detaching from that experience and what those papers represent.
Right. It becomes, if anything, it only remains as a memory burden or anchor, memory anchor. I think that's what Jill Benedict called them. And, and that's what they are. But once you get rid of the physical thing, that box that I've been carrying around since 2001, when it was finally done on Valentine's Day, by the way, sort of an interesting moment. But when that then to burn it in 2021, so 20 years later, I mean, I thought I would feel more, and maybe that's what I was hoping for. That I would experience some more emotion, something, but it was already done. It was already buried. It was already finished in me. It was like showing up to a funeral and it's already done. Everybody's left. The grass has already grown over where the casket is buried. It's like, that's it. It was kind of one of those moments. If that makes any sense, it was like that.
It does.
Seen a shooting star tonight, and I thought of you. You were trying to break into another world, a world I never knew. I always kind of wonder if you ever made it through. Seen a shooting star tonight, and I thought of you. Seen a shooting star tonight, and I thought of me. if I was still the same, if I ever became what you wanted me to be. Did I miss the mark, overstep the line only you could see? Since you started the night and I thought of me. Listen to the engine, listen to the bell. It's the last fire truck from hell goes rolling by. All good people are praying. It's the last temptation, the last account, the last time you might hear the servant on the mount. The last radio is playing. Seen the shooting star tonight slip away. Tomorrow will be another day. Guess it's too late to say the things to you that you needed to hear me say. Seen a shooting star tonight slip away.
I have one more question for you
Sure.
before we wrap up. And this is kind of a tough question. When you think about moving from place to place, you do a dramatic move like this. Do you think, are you the same person on either side of the move? Or does moving change you?
I think it has to change you. I think it has to have changed me, but I'm so in that flow right now that I couldn't tell you. I don't have a clear sense of how, other than that sense of presence and in a mindful way that I'm now behaving that maybe I didn't behave before. It's a really interesting question. It has to have changed me, but yet I'm not sure. The book isn't written yet. I haven't figured out I'm not at the end of it yet.
But if you think of, like, for instance, at some point you moved into that house in New Hampshire from someplace else, and then when you now left that, you have now left that house, like, are you a different person, or is it the same person and all these things happen to this person?
Oh,
It's like a deep philosophical identity
from the
question.
beginning? You mean from
Yeah.
when we moved in 2006?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm definitely a different person. Absolutely. But in some ways, I still feel like that person, even though I'm 15 years older.
That's sort of like my media experience when we revisit that space and I feel haunted. It's like, I feel like almost like the shadow of that younger self, or the younger self is the shadow of my present self, like, or an echo. It's sort of like a reverberant sort of phenomenon. They're not quite the same person, not quite the same sound, but it resembles that person.
Do you think that sometimes people go back to places the way that we're describing to recapture some of that and ask some of who you were in that moment?
I think that happens a lot. I mean, listeners, you can send us an email if you have had an experience, and we'll read it on the podcast. But I would imagine, like, that's very common. But what do they say? You can never go home again, or something like that, or it's almost an impossible task to, like, because that place has changed. Like,
Oh yeah.
I mean, part of it persists, but a lot of it has changed. So things aren't going to be familiar. I mean, the town I live in now, Westchester, we've been here 20 years, and Westchester 20 years ago, well, it looks a lot different today.
Mhm.
Like, there's, in some ways, there's certain streets that would be unrecognizable. And I have a hard time even remembering what they used to look like, because new buildings went up and buildings got raised, and You know,
You know, I have a related story that I've got to share with you that I'm just reminded of. My dad grew up on a street in Providence, Rhode Island called Goddard Ave, which I think doesn't exist anymore. And he used to tell us about this place. I mean, they had such a small place that they only got half a number. It was like 35 and a half or something like that. And I once found it on a map and I went back and it was a vacant lot. And I'm not sure what I was going back to, why I was going there. It was like literally at that time, probably 35 years after he had left that place. And I remember being very disappointed. That was probably the most emotion that I felt because I was going for something and it wasn't there at all. It was just, it had been raised. It was just a parking lot. That was it. And I had another experience like that actually when I first moved to New Hampshire from back from Albany a long time ago. And it was just my son and I, and we lived in this dumpy place that was owned by Dartmouth College, and it was a place to be, and this little community. And at some point, maybe 10 years ago, they bulldozed the entire thing because it was made in the 40s, built in the 40s, and it was time. When I was living there, it was time. and he and I used to drive back, and we'd go to where our driveway was. There's nothing else there. Like for a long time, there was one house remaining, and then it was gone. And like the road was there, everything else was gone except for we could tell where the driveway was, and we'd go and sit and talk. But that was almost more emotional than anything else that we've talked about today. It was just I don't know why I even would go back.
the place only exists in memory now.
Right. Exactly.
There's no hook in reality for it in space.
None. But it's this thing that he and I can talk about, that it's like only he and I can talk about it. My wife never lived there. I mean, I think my wife had seen the places, but she didn't have that experience. And from the time he was I think he was 2 until he was 6, he and I lived there. And then I bought a house, and in that place, I lived there for 4 years, and I felt nothing when I left. And even when I go back, and I'll probably never go back again, because now I'm 400 miles away. There'd be no way to drop by.
Right. Google Street View. That's your only option.
Yeah. We have that now. We didn't have that then. Technology changes these things, doesn't it?
It does.
The wing and the wheel, they carry things away. Whether it's me that does the leaving or the love that flies away. The moon outside my window looks so lonely tonight. There's a chunk out of its middle that's big enough for an old fool to hide. Where are all the dreamers that I used to know? We used to linger beneath street lights with our halos in the snow. The wing and the wheel, they came, carry them away. Now they live out in the suburbs where their dreams are in their children's play. Sky in the east and all the stars are in the west. So here's to all the dreamers, may our open hearts find rest. The wing and the wheel, they're gonna carry us along, and we'll have memories for company long after the songs are sung.
Well, that was a fun discussion. I really enjoyed
Yeah.
exploring this theme of moving. I mean, there's so much more we could say about it. I wish you well with your new move.
Thank you.
You're now on the other side of it, pretty much.
Right. Well, thank you. I appreciate the time talking with you, and I'm looking forward to the next topic.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Padula Rasa. I wanted to give the musical credits for today's show. First, you heard a snippet of Blackbird by the Beatles, played by Dave's daughter. You heard The Moving Song, written by yours truly, recorded back in the late 80s with Stacy, my wife. Shooting Star by Bob Dylan from his Oh Mercy album that was covered by myself, Stacy, and our old bandmate Jim Morris, recorded in the mid-90s. Also from the mid to late 90s, The Wing and the Wheel by Nancy Griffith, covered by Jim Morris, accompanied by myself and Stacy. That was recorded in the late 90s. And Nancy Griffith is the songwriter, and she sadly passed away at the far too young age of 68 last week. I wanted to pay tribute to her. What a phenomenal songwriter and performer she was. Rest in peace, Nancy Griffith. You can find Padula Rasa at your favorite podcasting directory. If you'd like to send us feedback, send an email to padularasa@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and be well.